Let me tell you a story about the baddest dog that ever was. Sneaking poop from the fridge, tearing up the garbage. He's a goofy old Dexter the dog. He's a bad Dexter the dog. The baddest pup that there ever was. Seat stealing all day long, howling like a junkyard dog.
Hi, today's episode of Ask Tanya, we're going to talk about dogs barking at their neighbor's dog. So this is actually a pretty common question I get. That's why I'm loving these Ask Tanya episodes, because you guys are writing in with questions that I get all the time. And it's just a nice little reminder to me that, wow, that's a question I really should be addressing. So this question goes on, it says, and it's from Lynn. It says, our 3-year-old Shih Tzu, Annie, barks at the neighbors every time they or their dogs are out in the yard. Over the years, we have tried everything from ignoring it, making her come into the house, and scolding her, all to no avail. Our neighbors and their dogs have lived next to us and Annie for her entire life. We have a fenced-in yard, so don't understand Annie's behavior. Our other dog, Lexi, doesn't bark at all, nor do the neighbors' dogs. We don't want to use a shot collar, thank God. Is there a solution for this ongoing problem? Thanks. So, again, really nice question. And it sounds like Annie's barking at the neighbors too. So both these training lessons can be geared towards people or other dogs. She didn't mention whether or not Annie has any issues towards other dogs or other people in other situations. My guess is probably not. If so, we can, address that, later too. But it's not uncommon for dogs to want to bark out their window or in their yard when other things are passing. So whether that's another dog, or in Dexter's case, sometimes it's even a bag floating down the street, because they're in their home environment and they can feel a little territorial. What's that? What's going on? Or change that situation where we're outside, not in a fenced-in yard, but maybe going for a walk, and that same bag passes us, or that person passes us, and it's no big deal. So a couple things. The first thing is, as with any training behavior that you're trying to address, we need to kind of micromanage the situation. So for Annie, I'd want to know, can she see her yard when mom and dad aren't home? So meaning when she's in the house alone, can she see the neighbors from her windows? Because if so, we need to address that situation and make sure that can't happen. Because any of the training that mom or dad might do with Annie to try to get her comfortable about the other dogs, walking around their own yard, will go under the bus if, when they're not home, Annie's barking at the window and barking at what's going on. So we would need to micromanage that a little bit and make sure that when Annie's left alone, she doesn't have access to the windows and things like that if she's barking at them. So, it can be a little tricky, but, with a little thought process, we can kind of figure that out. So that'd be the first step. Make sure that Annie doesn't have access to barking out the windows when you're not home. The next thing we want to do is, because it's the neighbor especially, or the window, we never know when that's going to happen. So I want to be able to reinforce my dog for good behavior whenever that good behavior presents itself. So in that case, I'd end up with some dehydrated treats in my pocket, so that every time Annie's kind of looking out the window, I don't even care if there's a neighbor outside or a dog outside or not, but when she's looking out the window, I'm going to practice what I call, the name game, and say, Annie, and kind of, do this, and have Annie come off that boring window, come to me, get a nice reinforcement, and then go back to that window, maybe with Annie, and go, let's just look out the window. So what Annie is learning is, with no distractions, I can call her off that window, she's going to get a nice paycheck, and then we're going to go hang out and look out the window again. Because what I'm doing is setting up that foundation for eventually, when there's that distraction out the window, I have a little bit in my pocket that I can rely on to kind of get her to come off that window again. So then the next thing I want to do, and I'm going to do that multiple times throughout the day, because I want to make sure, if I want this to be a really good, strong behavior, I have to practice this often. I think she said she had another dog too, so if both dogs come, even if we call Annie, both dogs are going to go ahead and get a reinforcement. Why not? They're both coming off the window. Good, great, fantastic. So then the next thing that I want to do is teach Annie to be able to look out the window with me at the not strangers, or the dogs and the people and things like that, and not have a big reaction. So I may end up doing this setup with her on her harness and leash if I feel I need a little extra control and she gets a little too worked up. So my goal is always to make sure that things are going good. So when we're hanging out at the window, I might have that leash and harness on at first just for backup, just to make sure that we're okay. But I want to eliminate that process as quickly as possible, because attaching her to her harness and leash, although in the beginning stages can be helpful, is also a cue that we're in training mode. So that means in real life mode, when we're not practicing, it's a little harder to deal with. So, again, harness and leash if we have to, but I'd prefer not to if I can get away with it. So Annie and I are hanging out at the window. Again, I can reinforce her. I can practice her name game every once in a while. Annie, she just turns her head away from the window, gets a nice reinforcement. Now, when the neighbor or the other dog is outside, and, if you're friendly with your neighbor, you can even set this up so it can be a little practice session and you guys know about it. Or you can just take it when it happens. So now that other dog is outside the window, and again, I'm going to ask Annie if she can turn her head away from it and look towards me. She doesn't have to be perfect. I want to make it a split second, and then I'm going to reinforce her. Now, the reinforcement, whatever we're giving Annie, has to be amazing, because if she has a history of barking at the other dogs, if I'm trying to give her a snack that she might think of as boring, that she gets 20 times a day, it's probably not going to cut it. So instead, I need to make sure that reinforcement is really, really good. So usually meat tends to do really well, so whether that's cooked meat or dehydrated meat, but something smelly and stinky is usually going to be really good. So at the beginning, you're at the window with Annie. She sees the other dog. We can try her name game. Annie, she's right there with you. So all she has to do is just kind of turn around and look at you for that second. As soon as she does, treat, treat, treat. Oh, you're so smart. You're so smart. You're so smart. If that's really challenging, and again, we've already been practicing that name game, so she should have a history of that. But if that's really challenging, then I'm not even going to go, oh, crud. I'm not going to do the name game. I'm just going to reinforce. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to condition Annie that dog equals food. That dog equals food. So Annie sees the dog. It's okay if she even hits that bark at first. Don't worry about that. That should fade if you're really good. So she sees that other dog, and all you're going to do is go, boom, boom, oh, such a good girl, and give her that food. Oh, this is so good. This is so good. Okay, so a couple things are happening. What you're doing is you're teaching her that dog means food. That dog means food. So eventually, over time, we're going to end up building in that name game again. So now you're going to be able to go, Annie, and she turns away, and then she gets the reinforcement. But at the beginning, if it's too challenging to do the name game, it's dog equals food, dog equals food. If you see that dog, and you're trying to give her that food, and she's like, nope, I'm just going to bark at the dog. Bah, 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 bah. You got to juggle the two things. Is my reinforcement good enough? And if I really, truly think it is, then I need to make distance. So now I'm too close with Annie to that other dog to make this successful. So instead, I have to go, yep, I'm going to have to use that harness and leash. And in our practice sessions, I'm really going to try to get the neighbor to help me so I can actually be planned and try to do that. So I'm going to come off of that window with Annie and her leash and her harness to, 10 feet. So where she can see the dog and then get the reinforcement. I need to find that magic. How far away from X does Annie need to be able to be okay and get treats and not worry about it? We gotta figure that out. If we can't figure that out, then we're not going to be able to get that training episode going on. So we gotta find that magic number. It may not even be inside the house. We may not be able to do that inside the house. It may be too close. We might have to have blinds down or those pretty window clings down for a while. Maybe it's outside. So the other dog is outside in their fence. How far away do I need to be with Annie on her leash to be able to get that reinforcement? So maybe their dog is running in their yard way over there, and you and Annie are in your yard over here, harnessed and leashed. Can she then see that dog and then get that reinforcement and get rewarded and say, oh, okay? Because what we're doing is we are changing Annie's emotional response to a situation. So instead of going, oh, wow, dogs, no big deal, her mom's going to give me some food, I don't need to worry about it. She's like, dogs in my yard or next door to me, whoa, 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 whoa. So her emotions are like, whoa, over here. So we're working on changing her emotions where she's like, okay, no big deal. When I see those dogs, food's going to happen. Now that's all good and well, and it works really, really well. So this will be very successful for you. Again, if we practice often, and allow and find the way for Annie to be successful. I'm not gonna lie, it might take a little bit of, figuring out and being able to do a little bit of management to get that behavior to change. But it's definitely worth it. But it can, take time depending on how long Annie's history is at barking at the other dogs. And we can use this scenario with anything. I mean, training boils down to a few concepts. I need to find the distance that my dog can be successful and reinforce for them not to be upset or engaged or whatever it is that they're doing. And then slowly, that distance over time, depending on what's going on, we'll be able to get less and less and less and less and less. So what we're doing again is getting rid of that baggage of emotional stuff and trying to help her be calm and relaxed and that sort of thing. So hopefully you found these tips helpful. I am going to link up again above with some other articles that I wrote and some other videos that hopefully will be beneficial as well. And I do offer both phone sessions and in-person sessions if you're in the Toledo area, if you want any more details or how to work through these issues. And also up in the comments will be where you can submit your own question, and maybe I'll get to read them on air. So thanks again for participating. See you next time.